Stan's accidental descent into drug addiction in the episode A Jones for a Smith. During dinner with his family, Stan fully displays his usual holier-than-thou attitude, particularly towards the government's intention to help the homeless. He expresses his firm belief that everyone should fend for themselves and proves his point by refusing to help anyone with their requests.
No! Everyone asking for help!
Stan is so hell-bent on proving his point that he even refuses to bail his own wife from jail.
Francine, I'm sorry, but you need to get yourself out of this mess.
Okay, let's just ignore the part where the dude is using the toilet as a juice box. Francine later gets home and Stan feels his no-help policy is correct since she got out the problem herself. However, Francine is pissed at him as she ends up joining a gang and having to do community service at a soup kitchen. Meanwhile, here's what worries Stan about that whole statement.
No, it's wrong.
Later, Stan barges into the soup kitchen where his wife is serving her time and snatches the pot away as a way of taunting the hobos. While eating the soup to fight his cold, a shady-looking dude soon meets him and hands him a strange powder.
You know,
Stan clearly didn't learn the don't talk to strangers rule when he was young as he the blunt, which immediately makes him hear colors and see sounds.
Whoa!
Did he just call that creature mom? Stan continues doing the Zaza and gets noticeably energetic at work. FYI, no actual animals were hurt in the making of this video. While on one of his bunk sessions, Roger makes him realize he is on his way to being a crackhead.
Oh my god, it's crack.
And after this, Stan soon starts experiencing withdrawal symptoms and he immediately relapses. Things get worse as he starts selling anything valuable in the house to get more snow. His lowest point is seen when the family has dinner at Steve's crush's house and Stan decides to perform some ditty acts for some cash.
Get down!
And Roger sketches that he's on crack, blowing his son's chance to get laid. Later on, the family decides to hold an intervention for him, which makes him realize he's in a bad place. And even at that, he still refuses to take any help from rehab houses.
No!
Stan decides to lock himself in Roger's room, but you can guess what happened. Walking further down Crackhead Lane, he heads to rob his neighbors for some cash and the cops just randomly show up. So logically, Stan holds his neighbor hostage as the cops surround the house, and at this point they call in a hostage negotiator who doesn't even know what negotiation means.
Hello?
And he actually just escalates the situation. Imagine handing a robber extra hostage. Yeah, he even provides Stan with an escape plane to Colombia to get a cheaper crack. Stan thinks he's going to crack heaven, but on the contrary, he hits rock bottom and even gets mugged by a kid. After learning his lesson, the prodigal son returns home and apologizes for being a problem. It's on the bright side, he says he'll change. After a while, he finally stays at the rehab center and gets better.
Kicked it for good.
Oh,
I think Haley is a confident Meg. Am I bugging? Another display of Stan's unparalleled ability to mess up is seen when Stan's obsession with respect and money leads him down a destructive path as he becomes a ruthless meter maid in the episode Meter Maid. Stan drives to a certain location feeling upset that he is no longer somebody in life, and he recalls being disrespected by the neighborhood. When Stan takes Francine to a fancy restaurant to cheer her up, they meet a popular friend of theirs who is given a table without a reservation. So, of course, Stan had to attempt using his CIA status to get in too, but the outcome ended in a not-so-friendly situation.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
Later that night, he overhears Francine complaining to her sister. Ouch bro, even I felt that. Stan vents about his feeling of powerlessness to his supposed bro, who is more successful than him and couldn't give a rat's bum about his situation. And to send Stan to rock bottom, his car gets a ticket.
sorry, I already started.
Personally, if I were having the same crap day as Stan, I wouldn't take that level of disrespect. Well damn, I guess he didn't either. After getting sued, Francine assures Stan he'll be let off the hook, but we all know he won't be. These hoes really aren't loyal. His whole family becomes ashamed of him, and they make it obvious.
Cool guy.
As Stan begins his service as a metro maid, he complains bitterly about the disrespect the job is bringing, but his supervisor seems to be very proud of his job. Stan soon realizes the power he has and immediately begins trying out his newfound authority. Stan quickly grows drunk on the power and begins to abuse his new authority, displaying this by getting Francine into the restaurant they were previously kicked out of, which impresses Francine.
Caviar, my lady.
However, power doesn't equal money, as he soon realizes, since Francine also had wanted the luxurious life that comes with power. Even after getting into the house parade, Francine still gets mocked for how mid their house looks, as she does what any understanding wife would do.
Stan, expensive is only a problem.
Stan, however, fails at bringing the painter to work for free, and while feeling sad that he might be back to his powerless status, he gets a crazy idea.
we're gonna be able to afford that paint job after all.
Afterward, Stan's respect stock skyrockets, however Francine becomes suspicious when she notices he has more coins than a wishing fountain, but she decides to close her eyes to where it's coming from as she could enjoy the life she had always wanted, and made sure to show up those who mocked her. Soon after, conflict arises as Stan is approached by a member of the parking internal affairs with complaints of being short of money from parking tickets, and Stan tries playing it cool. After this encounter, Stan rushes back to the house and informs Francine that the internal affairs dude is onto their dirty deeds. Speaking of the devil, the dude shows up to their house, and for some reason keeps forgetting stuff in his car, which gives Stan and Francine some time to try and destroy all evidence of their reckless spending.
Dump it all!
Damn, I think I should become a Metro Maid too. They both realize their mistakes and Stan prepares to hand himself in, but to his surprise,
Your community service is finished.
So, Stan heads back to his boring life of being a CIA agent. Meanwhile, yeah, that's what he considers boring. The next highlight of Stan's bad decision-making is seen when Stan comes home from another dangerous mission and finds that his family has decked the halls with boughs of holly and donned themselves with Diddy apparel, but just not to his satisfaction in the most adequate Christmas ever. The whole family excitedly sets up the Christmas decorations and tree in preparation for Stan, only for him to return to rate the place lower than Madame Web movie at the box office.
What do you mean? The halls are fully decked.
After criticizing the hell out of their efforts to fill the house with the Christmas spirit, he leads them out in a blizzard to find the perfect Christmas tree. While almost turning into ice statues, Francine tries talking some sense into him.
You all hate Christmas so much?
Well, we all knew Stan was a colossal hat though, so no surprises there. Stan continues with his search for a tree, not realizing he is clearly in the wrong. Shortly after, Stan spots the tree that suits his taste and almost crosses to the other side while trying to get to it.
That's what it would sound like if I'd fallen much farther.
He finally gets to the tree, and when he finally cuts it down, it collapses on him, after which he suddenly sees himself in an ice cream shop with some dude.
The news that you're dead!
After this, he shows him around the afterlife and tells him to wait at a park bench for his verdict of where he'd go, heaven or hell. Stan, however, asks for a second chance, so the dude informs him of how to do so.
You'll be assigned a lawyer.
The dude provides Stan with a lawyer that seems to be the bottom feeder, and the more Stan finds out about her, the more he panics.
Oh my god,
And personally, if my shot at a second life was hanging in the balance, I would too. So the Cupid lawyer begins his opening statement,
That's how I lost my first 10 cases.
and right off the bat he crushes it. But Stan's lawyer had a trash opening statement. After this, the Cupid lawyer shows an exhibit of why Stan should not be given a second chance, as he's an arrogant prick. Stan's lawyer counters this with a recording of how Stan humbled himself and took Steve's advice, which almost convinces everyone, until the baby shows them the rest of the clip.
That's my dad.
The judge then rules against his second chance, and Stan is told that his family would soon be joining him since he left them in the cold. This makes him crash out and hold his lawyer hostage, intending to force his way to see God and get a second chance. The two hijack a carriage, battle with some angels, and finally arrive at the pearly gates. They encounter some problems at the gate, but Stan's lawyer handles it,
And we all know what happened to him.
and the two sneak into the party disguised as music artists. Stan finds the big guy's office, and since he's all-knowing, he turns him down as he already knows what Stan had come for. Stan then pulls a gun on him, and the big guy humbles Stan,
No, yes,
so Stan decides to back down and trust him. Turns out it was all a test from the big guy, and he decides to send him back. Up next is when Stan finds himself legally separated from his favorite foods as Langley Falls implements a ban on trans fats, and he sets a poor example for the rest of the family when he blatantly disregards the law by using Steve as a trans fatty food mule to satisfy his own gluttonous desires in Live and Let Fry. While having breakfast with the family, Stan goes through the news and sees that his neighbor's wife had been fined for breaking certain laws. After Stan does his thing,
Hey neighbor, nice mug in the local crime beat.
he gets back to his family and puts out his opinion about sticking with the law no matter what.
It's the law.
Later at dinner, while the Diddy News team presents the news, they announce that the government has put a ban on trans fat, and Stan just shrugs his shoulders about it.
Well, if that's the law, then we're gonna have to follow it.
He soon realizes how important trans fat is in making food taste good. However, he makes up his mind to manage the food since it's the law. Stan tries his best to endure the horror but folds later on and heads to a black market-ish location to get some trans fat and contradicts his own words as he clearly ignores the signs prohibiting trans fat. At work, while everyone struggles to cope with the ban and others literally give up Stan, does a Mission Impossible exit to the bathroom to have his illegal lunch and almost gets caught by his colleague. But lively, he lives to see another day. At dinner, the family realizes that they're breaking the trans fat ban law, and Stan goes back on his word of always following the law because he finds this particular law stupid.
It shouldn't exist to begin with.
The next day, after Stan gets his usual supply for his dealer, he encounters a cop who's investigating trans fat lawbreakers, and I don't understand how the cop would literally turn a blind eye as Stan goes back to dump the stash of the product. When Stan returns, he informs Francine that he can't get any more trans fat as she loses it. Stan immediately gets a crazy idea when he spots Steven and makes a deal to use him as his smuggler in exchange for a rabbit he wants. And after getting the trans fat, his prize is handed to him but doesn't last too long.
Oh, Bunny!
On the next delivery, Steve decides to break some rules and ignore wearing his helmet, but this turns out to be a bad idea as the cop stops him. After a few questions, he almost busts him, but Steve comes up with a lie.
Sandwiches for the poor.
He almost gets caught in the lie, but miraculously, he eats all the fat before the cop could realize and heads on his way. The cop trails him home and Steve quickly updates Stan on what happened, but he suddenly starts feeling weird.
Feeling a little sweaty.
But he refuses to go to the hospital and suggests they get rid of the cop instead. Stan realizes his mistakes and ignores the consequences, taking Steve to the hospital. Stan admits that Steve's safety comes first, which surprises Steve, although he admits that he suffered a lot for breaking the law.
Having you safe and sound is all that matters.
Moving on to the next exhibit, where Stan fears he may not be Haley's biological father after a one-night stand Francine had, and goes to great lengths to prove he's her real dad, eventually causing emotional damage to Haley and almost losing his own kidney in the process, and the kidney stays in the picture. While having breakfast, Francine gets a taste of a perfect beagle and wants to share her experience with others, so Haley introduces her to a Facebook where she can connect with people from the past. Francine suggests searching for a friend of hers named Kelly, but Stan is against the idea.
They called her the kidney killer.
And even after his stern warning, the girls still go ahead with doing what they wanted.
Do not friend her.
Later at night, Francine almost gets a heart attack when she sees Kelly in a nun outfit. Psych, she's still a party monster. After Haley gets introduced to Kelly, Kelly invites her out to drink, and after a couple drinks, Haley could barely lift her head. Wanting to prove that she's a cool gal, Haley refuses to heed her mom's warnings of taking Kelly's signature drink, and once again the kidney killer strikes. They take her to hospital, and Francine informs Stan that she'll need a kidney transplant, which he immediately agrees to. However,
What? Don't be ridiculous. Why wouldn't I be a match?
Francine confesses that she cheated on him the night before their wedding, and this makes Stan heartbroken. The doctor, however, tells them to act fast in getting a kidney as she doesn't have much time, and Francine has to figure out Haley most likely dad.
Huh?
But what a hoe. Jeez, Stan gets furious at her, and Francine argues that Haley may still be his daughter.
Fine.
Responded like a true Sigma male, omitting the last statement though. Stan tries finding Haley's, maybe dad with the CIA's finest equipment.
Oh, come on, run it again.
Shocker, it didn't work. And just as he is getting frustrated, a colleague of his suggests he use the time establishment's time machine. After they prep them and tell them the rules, the two went to the night of the deed, and they track Francine to see who she hooked up with. They finally get the identity of the guy, but before they could leave, Stan just had to be Stan.
That is not nice, young lady.
This guy must have missed a lot of Marvel shows about time travel. Francine explains the consequence of his actions to him and tells him to get her land if he wants to resolve things. But when they meet with their younger selves, young Francine refuses to sleep with anyone else, no matter how hard they try to convince her. So, Stan gets an idea on how to make her own decisions.
Come on in, you're safe here. I will not.
And after helping Roger create the drug, they succeed in hooking the two up. Before leaving, Stan breaks every time travel rule as he blabs about future mistakes to his younger self and tells him to avoid making those mistakes. Back, Stan says he doesn't care about the results of the test and only wants the best for Haley. However, the doctor asks how he got Joel's kidney.
I called in a favor.
Following this is a situation when Stan is tasked with stopping a terrorist plot to bomb a football stadium during a high school game in the Long Bomb. During the Langley Falls Big Championship match, a group of terrorists invade the stadium. Meanwhile, we get to see a very rare moment where Stan and Haley are alone.
People are saying...
Now that's an awkward situation. Immediately they get to the stadium. Stan tries every excuse to buy so he can come back when the game starts, and finally, while distracting himself with anything he could find, he follows on a suspicious dude into a control room and finds him planting explosives.
Is that a bomb, Great Dwight?
Meanwhile, Haley goes to check on Stan as he's taking too long, and she follows him into a room where two of the terrorists are.
Be
Fingers crossed. Her husband's?
Meanwhile, Stan escapes through the vents and communicates with the walkie-talkie with one of the terrorists, who I think is in a relationship with Hans. That aside, Stan hears that Haley has been taken captive, worrying him.
Terrorists have Haley in the owner's box.
Okay, I think Stan needs to see a shrink. Meanwhile, Haley finds a way to communicate with Stan so he knows she's safe and he should decide the bomb they planted.
Haley's communicating with me.
Stan must have ADHD with the way he gets distracted. Now, I'm the one going off topic. Stan finds the rafter where the bomb is located but encounters one of the terrorists, but he does the coolest takedown ever.
It'll look hella cool.
Nothing beats Brain Rot series. The main villain gets frustrated that Stan is dropping his guys but feels confident that they'll get into the stadium's secret vault before Stan can find all the bombs. However, Haley finds a smart way of leading Stan to the location of bombs, however he gets in a tight spot
How am I supposed to get on the field?
when he has to disarm a bomb located on the field. After disarming the bomb, the main villain figures that Haley is Stan's daughter and uses her as bait to capture him. Now here comes more twists and turns than a roller coaster path.
Time we needed to get this.
Haley finds a way to disarm Johnny, and after a while of chasing him, they are able to take him down. However, they still have to think of where he hid the real bomb and head down to the urn to disarm it. Haley soon figures that it'll go off if the sound meter hits 0, and the two go into a therapy session while preventing this from happening. The two resolve their issues while defusing the bomb, and they can finally relax, right?
We're all gonna be okay.
Up next is when Stan becomes obsessed with proving he's a better actor than Roger and insists on taking a role in one of Roger's plays. And his ego gets in the way, leading to a chaotic performance that ruins the play, damages his relationship with Roger, and embarrasses him in front of his family and a pinata named Desire. While the family has dinner, Roger cuts Stan off in the middle of his usual storytelling session to brag about his just concluded audition and theater career, but Stan doesn't want to hear it.
What do you think you're doing?
How the hell is Stan even lactating? And even after Francine breaks up their lovers spat, Stan still stands his ground that he's a better actor than Roger.
Roger, while you act in your little community theater plays.
While Roger practices his lines with the others, Stan barges in and mocks him, and so
Oh, rehearsing for your little play audition?
Roger decides to follow Stan to one of his sting operations. Just say Roger isn't born to be an actor.
Magic time.
And after such a horrible flop, Roger still rubs it in his face. Roger still won't let it go the following day, and Stan finally admits that he's a bad actor. Roger invites Stan to his acting classes, and after a bit of coaching, he gives the class exercises.
Okay, Stan, we're gonna run this scene.
Even after a while of training, Stan still sucked at acting, so Roger decides to handle his training personally, and with his help, Stan makes progress in his acting.
You can act!
I think Roger might swing in the male direction. Later on, Roger invites the family to witness his appointment as the lead actor in a Pinata Man play. But surprise, surprise,
Stan Smith!
Roger feels upset that he has been outshined, and by the day of the play, the female lead actor mysteriously gets injured,
Really? Seems like something I would totally do.
and when the play starts, the two do everything to one-up the other. But Roger had his trump card.
For long, because next is...
As the scene progresses, Roger thinks Stan won't go through with it, however. Well, that went from 0 to 100 real quick. Everyone might think they're doing it in public, but the two consider it as amazing acting. Francine, however.
Friends again?
Up next is Stan's insecurities about his self-image, masculinity, and need for validation from his family almost consumes him in the worst Stan. Stan hangs put with some of his best buds and one announces that he's getting married. In appreciation for setting them up, the groom decides to make Stan his best man. But before he could seal the deal,
Michael!
and man, does this crush Stan's heart. Stan later gets home and whines about what happened to Francine
A single guy friend, Francine.
and gives up hope to ever become someone's best man. However, Francine suggests he think of any other friends who are single. Stan's last hope is a guy named Brian.
Suppo Brian Lewis.
What you expect from a balding man named Brian. However, Francine still believes they can convince Brian to get married, with Stan as the best man. That's so hard right. Stan meets with Brian at a dinner and starts feeding him the idea of marriage, then executes his plan.
Boneless. No bones.
Brian reveals how someone dumped him because he couldn't commit, so the two head to meet this woman, only for her to turn it out to be the superintendent Brian works with. Stan tries changing her mind about Brian, but she has her conditions if they get back together. And finally, Stan walks Brian down, asking him to be the best man in a romantic setting. No diddy. A few days later, the superintendent expresses how impressed she is by Brian's change in lifestyle. Then she leaves the two to their wedding planning, and Stan eventually gets to know more about Brian.
That's me and Tracy Bryant.
Later at the wedding, Stan manages to F things up as he invites Brian's former prison mate to the event, who had a few things to say.
Cause you already married. To me!
The bride begins to panic and Stan promises to fix things. And Stan fixes things in his Stan way.
What's up in here?
However, when he meets Brian to share the news, he's shocked to meet the dude there, and he keeps getting his hopes crushed. Back at the house, everyone is confused about the thug living at their house, and Stan says it's just till Brian gets married.
I know how much being a best man means to you.
Later on, while having dinner, Stan finds out the superintendent's true goal,
When I realized I wanted a baby.
and she blackmails him into keeping his mouth shut. During the wedding, Stan realizes he was wrong to hook up the two, and of course he does the only logical step. Following this,
Brian, you can't marry that woman!
the bride crashes out at Stan and well. Lastly is when Stan almost loses his wife after divorcing her, hoping to rekindle their romance, since he can live like a bachelor again in when a Stan loves a woman. Francine shows Stan a rose bush she planned to commemorate when they first did the dirty dancing on their anniversary. But old boy does things take a dark turn.
A bunch of other people planted rose.
That's a whole ecosystem. With this info in mind, Stan becomes upset,
Without love is meaningless.
and Francine tries explaining that none of them meant anything to her. But Stan isn't comforted by this. After trying her best to pacify the man-baby, Francine gets fed up with him.
Do it.
Go do what?
Now here's Francine's perfect solution to the problem, and
Like when I saw an early screening of the sick.
even with this, Stan still turns down her suggestion, claiming he made a sacred vow to her. And blah 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 blah. Bro just made the Brotherhood shed a tear with that. It doesn't end here though.
What's this?
I figured out how you can sleep with another woman.
And when they tell their kids, Haley can process any of the news properly. However, Steve is on his way to being an addict.
And my legs will die.
But that's a story for another day. Stan dusts off his bachelor clothes, and for God's sake, I tried to see the difference from his regular clothes. Maybe it's his aura. After this, he heads to the club with Roger, as his wingman, and Stan is reminded of why he hates going out. But that's not the biggest disappointment.
All I need is $40.
Here's his game. Stan soon regrets the idea of hitting on women and goes to get Roger so they'll get the F out, but Roger is having too much fun. So Stan heads to a shooting range where he finds some chemistry, then the two head to a bar for some drinks and get to talking. These two are meant for each other. Exhibit B.
I had a great time tonight.
Me too.
And after she drops him at home, he begins ranting about her to Francine, who begins rethinking her choice. After realizing what she just did, Francine comes to regret her decision to divorce Stan, and Roger tries consoling her but gets sidetracked by his bimbos.
Hello, Bruce.
Later on, when Stan arrives from one of his dates with his new squeeze, Francine apologizes for giving him that idea. However, the dude is a commitment freak. Later on, the couple explains to the rest of the family how they ended up married,
What the is going on?
and Francine immediately loses it. Even when she asks him to call it quits and come back to her, he replies with the most Stan thing to say. He'd do anything at this point to prove his point, man. This leaves Francine broken, and she makes up her mind to win him back.
520 and 1611.
So Francine heads on her mission to her husband from shagging his soulmate. That sounds crazy, I know. However, she doesn't find him in any of the hotel rooms she checks, and forgets to check the most obvious room, the honeymoon suite. Thinking she has lost her husband, Francine sulks at the bar while a creep hits on her, but to her shock, Stan shows up. Oh snap, the twists here are twisted. Stan explains that he now understands what she tried explaining earlier, but Francine isn't pleased by this. Afterward, the two get remarried. Not me, exes or douches.